I
Now I
didn't.
There,
am.
now he is.
We are live. We are recording. We are talking for the live and recording for the not yet awake or not or busy calling or doing something important like that. But happy Saturday, early Sunday, for to all of you. Um, Here we go again. I was going to look and I forgot. This is our 80th, 81st thing. We've been going for a while. And you guys keep coming back because we are a social group. We also talk a few things square dancing. Um, the our presenter tonight, our speaker tonight, uh,
Today.
today, this morning, this
I'm getting
weekend.
hang on. I'm getting a very faint, weird background noise. So if you're not actively talking, if you could mute yourself, that might be it.
Probably TV.
Might be. It sounds like something like maybe sped up in the background. Anyway, back to you, Don. Hey, there we go.
No, it was my noise. I muted myself. No. um, anyway, this gentleman. Well, man, I don't know if he's gentle or not. I've never. Yeah, we did meet in person once.
Okay.
And the bruises I have healed. I started dancing in 1969 as a teenager and was dancing, yeah, and calling in 1970, and then decided to stop for a week or two. Actually, for 24 years, he laid off and then came back with a vengeance recently. Um, and in his non-square dance years, he happened to do things like, well, I guess this was during playing jazz piano and working on the road for 5 years with a band. So it has a little to do with music in his life. He's also worked for some music software companies, and the outside of and worked in a recording studio doing arranging and producing. That's actually one of the things that probably will come into view this time. One of the things that I like to do is um, try and hear from people that have worked in fields outside of square dancing and can bring some of that outside knowledge into square dancing, even though it's just a small segment of square dancing. And one of those is sound and audio. Many of you, I hope, have heard of PV Electronics. They do an awful lot of amplifiers and speakers and probably other stuff for musical groups and such, but not necessarily used that much in square dancing. Anyway, this gentleman has worked for them and has picked up a lot of knowledge and is going to share that knowledge with us today. I'm doing this all wrong. So before introducing the actual guy, I don't usually do this, but I want to make another announcement. We spoke last week in a discussion afterwards, and the discussion after the discussion, etc. One of the things that came up was marketing. And eventually people mentioned that Color Lab has a marketing book, and they brought up links to that online. And the prime author of that was Mike Hogan, a caller and marketing person for non-square dance stuff too. Mike will be presenting on marketing for us next week.
Cool.
And I wanted to let you guys know about that and this week to tell your to sell it to your friends and to be sure to come back. Where was I? I was in Colorado about to introduce our PV Electronics ex-employee who's going to talk to us about sound and audio and how it relates to square dancing. Let's have a big hand for Larry Marchese.
Yeah.
How's that for an introduction, Larry?
Beautiful.
You can fill in the cracks too, but
Okay. How was everyone?
so far so good.
Can everyone see the screen?
Yeah.
All right,
Yes.
cool. So, yeah, there is quite a bit of overlap. And as a young person, I was a square dance caller, and I got my first Newcomb unit when I was around 13. I'm not absolutely sure about that. But our teen club had a system, but I don't even remember what kind it was. So I didn't need a system right away when I started calling for them in 1972. And then I got a Hilton after that. Well, during junior high and high school, I got involved in a lot of rock bands. And I ended up, basically, I was like the only musician that I knew that had a job. so I bought all the equipment. So I owned all the equipment, and I eventually turned that into a sound reinforcement company. So during my college years, I was kind of a for hired sound company. So beauty pageants would hire me, talent shows would hire me, outdoor events would hire me, and I would come and set up equipment and run the soundboard. And so that was, how I first got connected to audio and how to hook up various audio products. And then later on, I joined PV Electronics and became a product development manager, which was pretty fun. That was a lot of fun. I designed mixers, I designed guitar amps, I designed studio equipment and keyboards, and I had 120 products that I was responsible for. And so not to give you the wrong impression, I worked with engineers. I myself am not an engineer, but I worked especially with mechanical engineers because they're the ones that took care of the the outer part, I guess, of the product. And then I worked with electrical engineers who designed the circuit boards and that sort of thing. So I was very involved on the audio side. So that's my background. Certainly square dancing had a small place in that because, when I had, I got my first Hilton when I was around 15 or 16. And, so I, learned how to hook it up and all the options with it. So anyway, so as a caller, our audio sources, we have to think about that. So the primary audio source that we think about is probably our music. That's on these days is on a computer. Some of you, it may be still records, 45s. Certainly when I returned to calling, I had thousands of 45s and I gave them away. And so I think I have maybe 100 left. But the other audio source is your voice via a microphone. And then there's a couple of other audio sources that, well, one of them I have to deal with at every dance, which is a signal for hearing assist systems. Sometimes I have like more than one, like I did a dance recently. I had 3 different hearing assist systems connected to my mixer. And that's because some people use the generics hearing assist transmission signal. And some people had like their own private Bluetooth to their what are they called? These things they hearing aids. Duh, I can't think of the word. Yeah, hearing aids. So they have Bluetooth hearing aids. So they hook their Bluetooth transmitter to my setup. I had like a splitter with like 3 different hearing assist systems all connected at once, and I worked fine. So and then the other is a recording output. Some of you may not be in the habit of recording yourself. Let me that would be a whole different topic, but let me recommend it because you will learn so much about your calling. And it's nice to put the camera where it's pointing at the dancers, not you. And so you can see what the dancers are doing when you're calling. And I know of nothing else that will educate you on what you need to do better than recording yourself, whether it's video or audio. But as far as an audio device, the recording output will give you the signal for that. Now, there is often the need to separate the vocal and the music, and we'll get into that a little later. Any of you guys seen the unit in this picture live? It's the 446. Yeah. But yeah, Paul brought it to Colorado and at a dance, and I got to call through it and check it out. And he calls it the beast, and I agree with that. So, okay. So in terms of common setups, there's often, probably the most popular, certainly in our area, is a Hilton, MA unit with a yak stack. And the second most common is a Hilton MA with some type of third party system, like I would, in my area, the Bose L1 Compact, by the way, that just got discontinued. That is by far the most common in my area. But I've seen lots of other powered speakers and non-powered. And we'll talk about what that means in a minute. And then some people use a third-party mixer with a powered speaker. I would be one of those persons that do that. Some people use a third-party powered mixer, and we're gonna talk about powered and non-powered in a minute. But they use a third-party powered mixer, and they connect it to a non-powered speaker, like a yak. Okay, so those are the four setups. Have any of you seen anything other than those? Those are the four that I see. Okay, cool. So when it comes to figuring out what type of mixer, amplifier, speakers that we want to use, one question is, what kind of content are we going to play at our square dance? Some of these systems are optimized for what I would call traditional square dance titles. And depending on if it's older models or newer models, its ability to handle music that's purchased from iTunes and Amazon and such, could be an issue. And if you want to use that type of music, you may need to think about using perhaps a slightly different speaker system. So at the very beginning, you want to think about what kind of music are you going to use, and that'll point you to the best setup for yourself. Okay, so let's talk about some of these terms and what they mean. So back in the very, very early days of audio, the power amplifier, which is what took a signal and made it much, much louder than it would normally be, was a standalone box. And you still can get those today. And all it is an amplifier. It does nothing else. You hook a mixer to it and you hook speakers to it, and it powers the sound system. And that's called a power amplifier. And then there's a powered mixer, which is a mixer and a power amplifier together. Okay. And those systems are designed to connect to non-powered speakers. I call them passive speakers. A yak stack would be an example of that. And there's loads of speakers. If you go to Guitar Center or any type of music store, you'll see lots of passive speakers and lots of powered speakers. So a powered speaker, it has an amplifier inside of it. Okay, so again, it's a combo. It's a speaker and a power amp all in one nice package. And then in some cases, the whole thing is together. So there's a speaker, a power amp, and a mixer, and they're all one package that you can look at. Technically, the Bose L1 Compact is that. It actually has a mixer in it, but it's not convenient because it's sitting on the floor. And so I hook a mixer up to it because I use a table with my computer and all of that. So there's also an audio mixer by itself, and those are, typically pretty inexpensive. And those allow you to do some special things to your music and to your vocal in the terms of EQ. Okay, so that is the bass signal, the treble signal, and the mid-range signal. And then, of course, you've got the capabilities like an MA that have, very basic tone control. The other thing we have to think about is how we're going to manage the volume when we're calling. So we have a local caller who stands by the table. He has an MA, and he stands next to the table. He takes his hand and he puts it on the volume knob, and he holds the mic here, and he has his hand on the volume knob of the MA. And he never uses the wheel or any of that. He just takes his hand, and his hand literally sits there the entire time he's calling. That would drive me crazy. But that's how he does it. The most common way is with a Hilton microphone adapter. Everybody know what that is? I assume you do. I can pull one out and show it to you. But let me pull one out and show it to you. I've got my bag here anyway. Just in case someone, I think of those of you that are not from the US, forgive me, because I think of everything in terms of what's in the US. And I know it's a different situation. Here we go. Talking about this guy. I replaced the knob, by the way, if you're wondering about that.
You might want to stop sharing for a moment so that people can see it full
Oh,
size.
can you not see it?
Well, we can see it in our little window down beside, but.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll wait till the end.
Okay.
And I'll kind of show it there. So anyway, we have to find a way to manage volume. And that can be by having you put your hand on a knob. It can be by using the Hilton microphone, but some way or the other, we have to manage the volume. And what we're really talking about is the balance between your vocal and your music. We have to kind of get that right so the dancers can dance successfully. And sometimes that takes a little tweaking. At the very last term on this PowerPoint has the letters EFX, which mean effects. And historically, those were never used in square dancing, but some callers have found some ways. This is typically, like a reverb control. And I kind of laugh at that because my hall provides plenty of reverb, right? So you may not need, your problem may be reverse. You may need less reverb, but effects can be many things. And I don't want to get into that today because that's more of an advanced thing to talk about. Any questions about these terms?
Larry,
Yep.
You mentioned EQ. You probably should expand that it means equalizer, to equalize the different frequencies, even though you could talk up mid-range, treble and bass.
Right. It's interesting. EQ is interesting because if you use a mixer, you often have individual control. There's one particular caller that I'm thinking of who's like a travel, like a well-known caller. He is very, very particular about the EQ. And he particularly changes the mid-range control. And so some people, EQ is really important to them. If it is, you probably want to think about using a mixer because it has a lot more EQ control. But for myself, maybe for you as well, EQ is not like a critical thing.
I used to bug Hilton trying to get him to put a mid-range tone in the microphone so that I could emphasize the voice without too much boominess and of course it varies with type of microphone too. But
yeah, see with my mixer, it has that 2.5 mid-range, and I bought it because of that. And but I only rarely need it, but when I do need it, I need it. But most halls I'm fine without it. But it's handy to have the ability to change that if you need to. Okay, let's talk about cables for a second. I see a lot of confusion about this. The primary confusion I see is the difference between audio cables, which in terms of a technical term are quote shielded, and speaker cables, which are quote unquote not shielded. And I don't want to get into the technical reasons of why that difference is there, but it's best to use speaker cables for passive speakers. Now, here's where it gets tricky. When you connect to a powered speaker, you don't use a speaker cable. you use an audio cable. Okay, so because you're not actually, the cable doesn't have that powered signal going through it when you're connecting to a powered speaker. Did you see the difference between, using a traditional speaker cable and an audio cable for connecting? So here's the rule. If you're connecting to a powered speaker, use an audio cable. If you're connecting to a passive speaker like a yak stack, in other words, you're using an MA or a powered mixer, then you use a speaker cable for that. And try not to cross those. The other thing that's handy to know is about connector size. Now, this is more about connecting your computer to an MA or your computer to a mixer. Now, most of you probably have a 3.5 millimeter to 3.5 millimeter that goes from your headphone output right into an MA unit. That's what probably the cable you need. But if you need another, like if your cable goes bad or you need a backup, you need to know what to ask for if you're going to go to a music store and, get your replacement. Now, I personally, I don't use the headphone output of my computer. I use the USB, and then I go to a little audio box, and then I take the audio box and go into my Bose. Some people can call that a sound card. Let's see. Here's one right here. I'll when I'm stopped sharing, I'll give you a better view of that. But that's just a preference, and you can decide whether the audio benefit, is beneficial to you. This also allows me to record to my computer as well, in a real nice way. The other thing you have to think about with cables is this concept of female and male. Okay, so maybe you're connecting from your MA to your speaker, and your computer to your MA. Said that wrong. So you're connecting your computer to your MA or your mixer, and you need more distance. So you need some kind of extension. Well, you want to make sure that you recognize the male and femaleness of cables. Okay. So in this picture, the one at the very bottom, what is that? That is a male, right? M-A-L-E, male. All right. That's a male connector. All right. So the opposite of that, is the female connector. So if you're getting an extension, you're going to need female on one side and male on the other. So just make sure you know what to ask for. Okay, so the other thing we need to talk about is difference in certain cables, most notably 1/4-inch cables. And I'll show you a real 1/4-inch cable when we get through with this presentation. But there's two types if you're going to get Guitar Center or a music store to buy them. And one is called TRS and the other is TS. In most cases, you just need a TS. So just notice it'll still work. If you buy a TRS, you're just going to pay more money for it. And you can, for most cases, a TS 1/4-inch is all you need. Okay. So we have to deal with a little bit of wiring. Okay, so we have computer to our MA or our mixer, and then we might have a signal from our mixer to another speaker, and we might also have from our mixer to a hearing assist. So you kind of have to work out, what kind of cabling you're going to need. Now, if you are lucky to own your own hearing assist system, you can get it out and see what kind of cabling you need. So any questions about cabling? Okay. Let's talk about yak stacks for a second. So with my C1 group, they have their own sound system, and it's a yak and an MA. And so when I call for them, I get to call through that. And which was a little shocking in the beginning, but I've now gotten used to it, and it's all good. and they have what is considered an old yak. Okay. And so Scott, the new owner of Yak Stacks, has helped me a lot to get the older yak sounding good. So, for example, I learned that it sounds a whole lot better if you keep the top stack and the bottom stack together. I learned that a half yak is not one of those. Okay, a half yak is a whole different thing, component wise inside. And so if you use a full stack like a half yak, you're not taking advantage of what you could. And the best sound of all apparently is a yak stack on a stand pointed down so it doesn't hit the back wall. And but the other thing that's important to think about is there is a new yak stack, and it does not sound like the traditional yak stack. So I'm eager to see what callers are going to think about this, because callers have been using yak stacks, the original yak stack, for a long time, and this new one has a very different sound. Scott was at Color Lab with it doing like A/B comparisons, and so some of you may have yak stacks now, some of you may use something else, but do know that the new model is quite a bit different from the old. And at the moment, I personally don't have experience with the new one yet, other than hearing it at Color Lab in an A&B scenario. Any questions about yaks?
I'm wondering, Larry, do you know what changes he's made on the new yak?
Well, for one, the speakers are different. And I don't know, well, and also the original yaks were wired out of phase on purpose, and the new ones are in phase. So you don't want to, if you get a new one, you don't want to use the new one and old one together. They'll actually phase cancel. There'll be like a dead spot. Yeah.
I suspect there was a mistake in that, because originally Irv did not have them out of phase. My old one, they are definitely in phase.
Really? Well, this is what Scott told me.
Yeah.
Well, I am not a yak expert, and all my information about yaks came from Scott Bennett at Color Lab. We had quite a long discussion, and that's just what his view was.
I think he was the third person with it, and it probably got switched phase-wise someplace along the way.
Could have been.
And I'm glad he's corrected it and got it back.
Yeah. He's corrected that.
Definitely important.
Yes. Let's talk about purchasing gear. So if you're going to get a yak stack, you buy it from Yak, or you find a used one of the two. Just remember, the new models do not sound like the old models. And of course, Hilton, you buy that directly from Hilton. You can buy other products from Sweetwater Sound. That's my personal favorite place to shop. We have a local guitar center. You can go there and you can look at what they have. And they're going to have, powered speakers. If you already have an MA, they will have passive speakers. One challenge you're going to encounter is connecting existing equipment you have to new modern equipment. You'll find the connectors might be different than what you need. And then there's other places. You guys may have your own favorite place, to shop. Okay, so let's chat a little bit about speakers. So as I said before, the Yak Stack is by far the most common passive speaker, meaning it's not powered, that's used in square dance applications. I have not seen I haven't seen really any other passive speakers used in square dancing. I've only seen powered speakers, but be aware that if you're using passive speakers, you do have to be careful about something called ohms. And I'm not going to get into the technical aspect of what that is, but amplifiers can only work efficiently under a certain type of ohmage. We'll say it that way. And for example, the Yaks are about 10.5 ohms each. You put them together and you got about a 5 ohm or 5 point something ohm load. And the Hilton is very happy with that. But the Hilton does not like to go below 4 ohms. right? So you have to be careful when you're hooking up passive speakers. With powered, you don't have to worry about anything. Power amps inside of the speaker, so you can hook up as many as you want. The other thing is some people like to use a monitor. Do any of you use a monitor? I'm just curious.
I have. I currently, for simplicity's sake, don't, but it's
Okay.
sure nice to have.
Yeah, it all depends on your hall and where everything is. You have to be able to hear yourself. One really nice thing about having a headset is I can just like walk up and stand right by the speaker. And of course, those of you that have worked, with sound a lot know that you have to be really careful to stand by the speaker because feedback can be a problem, right? But so I kind of use my own Bose as my monitor, but some people do use an extra monitor. And if you're gonna use that, you have to make sure your mixer can support that, and make sure that it's, well, if it's a non-powered, you're gonna have to find some way to power it. But if it's a powered monitor, it's easy to set that up. So speaker location is a little bit hard to talk about because every hall is different, every setup is different. And some of the sort of general principles are, get the speaker above, right above the head level of your dancers. If it's a small hall, try to, angle it down so it doesn't reflect off the back wall. You get into other issues when you get into halls that hold 10 or 12 squares. In my world, that's a rarity. About the most I've called for is about 10 squares, to date, and that's rare. But obviously the festival callers have to deal with a lot larger crowds than that. But my typical setup, when I'm calling C1, it's 2 squares. When I'm calling advanced, it's 2 squares. And when I'm calling plus, it's about 4 squares. Yeah, so that's about the extent of mine. And my primary hall, is larger than I actually need. So it's actually really easy to sound, even though it's a little echoey. But I find my Bose is particularly good about cutting through and being clear in sort of echoey halls. And you may have had success, yourself, and with whatever you use. But these days, in the 80s, I had to deal with speaker placement and, getting the sound right in halls a lot more, because in the 80s, I was calling to 20 squares, all the time, even 40 squares, right? So, that's a way bigger hall, way bigger situation. So it took a lot more work, to get the sound right. But these days, I just don't have that size, so it's a lot easier to deal with. Questions about anything related to audio?
So one of the things that I miss, whoops, Ralph, you keep unmuting yourself and that keeps giving us background noise and weird feedback. If you could only unmute yourself when you're going to talk, that would be awesome. One of the things I miss by buying my power speakers when I did is that the new versions have built-in delays on them for when you're trying to chain them down a long haul.
Okay. Yeah.
And I noticed you didn't mention delay systems, which
right.
If you're doing a festival, probably the sound guys who are sounding that are going to have that for themselves.
Right. Yeah. So what Dan's talking about is in big halls. Again, this was something we had to deal with in the 80s. I did. You get into real weird problems if you put, speakers down the sides of halls. In modern speakers, some of those have delays. Well, they're delay compensation is what they are. And they sort of synchronize the signal. So there's not as, the people in the back of the hall are hearing the music the same time the people in the front of the hall. But again, that's going to be a big hall. That's going to be for a big festival. it's going to be, you know, more of that setup. So for show and tell, I tried to show this earlier. I don't know how well you can see me, but this is the typical Hilton thing. Notice this one doesn't even have the reset anymore. This is a highly modified cable, by the way.
The other thing I think it's worth noting for new callers is that Hilton, the Hilton cable has a transformer of some sort in it, and I'm not sure what all of the details are, but if you take a regular 1/4 inch to XLR cable and plug your microphone into Hilton with that, it does not work very well.
Right. So I have some Hilton cables that I had the transformer taken out, and I put a XLR on the end to connect it like in a standard way to my mixer. I have that, and then I also you're gonna love this. I have this modified thing. This is my voice. This you actually plug from the computer into this, and then you plug this actually into the MA. Well, not the MA. This is when you don't have an MA, and this allows you to use this knob with like a Bose without anything else, just from the cable. And Donald Seaman did that. He created that for me. So that's a modified one. As far as sound cards that you can connect to your computer, this is my fave, this little one, because it's lightweight and made out of plastic. And it's got these kind of connectors on the back. And this just makes my music sound a lot better. And then I have, I got the box out for this. I have this little guy. And I use it for recording. And,
Dan, as far as the impedance matching transformer in the Hilton cable, most microphone, and I may get this backwards, but most microphones are high impedance, and most, I think it's the other way.
That's backwards. Yeah, microphones are low impedance.
Are low impedance, and most amplifiers like Hilton's are high impedance, and you have to match that with the transformer. Hilton chose, and I'm not sure why, to put the matching transformer at the microphone handle. I've always tried to convince them in the first cables that I built for my microphone had the impedance matching transformer in the plug that it went into the amplifier at the other end of the cable. Now, there are two advantages to that. One is that I had less weight to carry in my hand, and two is that the cable was low impedance instead of high impedance. And high impedance cables, if they're any really length, will pick up outside noise, whereas low impedance, you can have a much longer cable without getting interference from outside. So I was never quite sure why Hilton did that.
Yeah, I have my guesses on that. The original Hilton cable, it you know, back when these were first created, you know, like back in the 70s. Well, the cable itself might have been before that. Do you remember when the cable first came out?
No, I don't.
Well, anyway, I remember it in the early 70s, and that cable has volume and reset and the microphone signal. Three things. So the cable that you could get back in those days had a limited number of strands in it. So my guess is they needed two of the one for the volume, one for the reset. And since there's only one left for the vocal, they couldn't use low impedance because they would need three just for low impedance, or was it two? Yeah. And so they were forced to put the transformer in the headset so it would have that other functionality. That is my guess on why they did it.
I don't think that was it, because originally they didn't have the reset. They didn't have the turntable with the reset arm, and they didn't have the reset switch. And whenever I bought replacements, I never bought it with the reset because my turntable didn't. So they could have done it without that. The other thing that I was never happy with was, well, there are two things. One is being a mechanical engineer and doing a lot of human factors stuff. to me, to turn the volume up, I'd want to push my thumb wheel up, and to turn it down, I'd want to pull my thumb wheel down. And Hilton had it wired the opposite. And the other thing was that I'd want to be able to not just vary the volume a little and have it modulate and pulse a little, but I wanted to go all the way to 0. And Hilton would rewire, when I ordered cables from him, they would rewire it so the thumb wheel went in the opposite direction. I had them do that special for me. And they gave me some changes of a resistor or two inside the amplifier that I changed myself that made it so it would go the volume from 0 to 0 to full volume. I liked the fact that when I was finishing a tip, I could just fade the music out completely without having to reach over to the amplifier. I understand their reasoning for not doing full range. I still don't understand the reason for the reverse, and of course, whenever I was doing calling with other callers at an event and using their mic cable, it drove me crazy. I just had to not use it at all because I'd always turned it the wrong way. But just a little bit of background on that.
Yeah, I must be a creature of habit, having used that thing for so long that I've just gotten used to that.
Oh, if they changed it now, it'd drive everybody crazy. But
right, and it's funny, the reset wasn't there in the beginning, and then it was added, and now with the MA150, you don't even need it, right? But then with the 220, they found a reason, they turned the reset into a mute button on the MA220, and so they found a new use for it. So now the reset cable is back. So that's funny.
The other thing I want to point out is you were talking, you didn't want to go into speaker placement and that kind of thing, and a little about yaks.
It's hall dependent, right? So.
Right, yeah, but there's still some basics. And I want to remind people that on August 14th, 2021, and I didn't write that, I didn't remember that, I had to look on my spreadsheet here, but the presenter on here gave information about being myself, gave a talk on why we use column speakers and why the Yak Stack knows how to build a column speaker and how to take advantage of its design in sounding halls, and little tricks you can do to improve it, and little untricks that people frequently do that kill the advantage of using a yak, like splitting it in half, etc. So I recommend if you want to follow through this a little further, to go back and re-listen to the tape of that. And you can find it at http://www.youtube. No, forget it. Go to Dan Likes YouTube channel, or send me your request and I'll send you the link to it. Did you get a chance to listen, Larry?
Yes, I listened to your entire presentation.
Yeah.
And one of the things I wanted to note, because it took me a while to catch on to this with Sweetwater, when you order something from Sweetwater, they will send you your Sweetwater engineer is now some guy's name, and give you an email address. Use this person.
Yes.
You're going to buy something from them. This person is the equivalent of walking into the store and talking to somebody, and they are actually really good at, I need to get from here to there, what components do I need? Or this is in particular, a friend of mine was recently, he's older, he was trying to record and he wanted a very simple input, and we got him together with an old, with a Zoom recorder and a bunch of other things, Zoom being also the brand name of audio gear, not just this. And that guy was able to say, yes, these particular things work this way. I pulled it out of the box, I hooked it up. This is how it works. So use that person when you order from Sweetwater.
Where is Sweetwater located?
I think they're in Indiana or something.
Yeah, I think it's Fort Wayne, Indiana.
And, if you've got a local vendor, great. But my local vendor is not fantastic on a lot of this stuff.
Well, obviously Sweetwater is right in front of you on your computer screen, but but I was just curious. what was that? Oh, Larry, you said you were unaware of any other passive speakers used for calling.
Yeah.
There was a while that Bill Hyman in Supreme Audio was having speakers
Okay.
made.
Yeah, and there's that old Linron speaker
Yeah.
as well. I just thought of that.
I've got a 2-speaker short column of the Supreme Audio, and it was what I used with my advanced and challenge groups. So it was usually 2 or 3 squares, and it worked fine.
Right.
Even though it didn't, and it was just much lighter to carry than a yak stack. They're
Yeah, I've seen some Cures using some of those other speakers, and I'm also though it's interesting, the Cures in our area love the yak stacks, and they sometimes are a little unhappy when I show up and hook up my Bose L1 and mixer, and they often just set up their own setup because that's the way they want to do it. I've encountered two Cures that would rather hook into their own equipment. So
well, to repeat what I said a couple of years ago, yak stacks are not designed to give you the best high fidelity. They're a terrible living room speaker. They're
Right.
designed for projection so that dancers can hear the caller and the music.
Yep.
And they work pretty well for that. But there are other alternatives also. So I got my next question. If nobody else has got one, come on, people.
Bring
I
it.
put the there's a paper written, the background of Scott taking over Yak and some of the changes he's made from the site. I've just posted those into the chat, as well as the paper on the directional characteristics of column speakers. That was Aaron. So I've just posted those in. That was the same one that was posted when you were doing your session, Don, about Yaks and the setup. But
I keep forgetting you can post things like that. I'll post the URL to my to my what you call it.
I've had acoustic engineers set up halls for big events, and the difference when people are listening to them, if you don't know what you're sounding for a square dance hall, or you're doing a multi-event or one of those events where you're calling in a hall where there is a band or something like that, I very, very strongly recommend, if you don't get the chance to work with the band beforehand to show them the difference in sound, that you do take your equipment, regardless of the venue, because it is, as Don was saying, a very, very different type of sound that you want. I've used 2 yak stacks, and the Hilton, be it a 300, be it a 500, whatever. I have not found a hall yet that I could not sound effectively with 2 speakers if they're set up properly. That said, what Larry's saying about the Bose speakers, the setups, if you have somebody that is familiar with the quality of both sounds for calling and for setting up for an acoustic event, a festival or whatever, or even outdoor, if they know what it is, they can play with all the widgets and the big table full of knobs and whistles of really only three buttons only work on that. The rest is all for show anyway. They know how to play with that to give you good sound for the type of sound you want. But if you're ever there, get there beforehand, usually 2 or 3 hours beforehand, so they can set up the sound the way you want it, and walk out to where the midline of your dancers are and listen to what that sound is going to be like.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because we get very used to the sound that we normally use, and we kind of fall in love with it. And so when we're I would say this is going to be really rare today, but in these rare cases, where a sound company is actually like I have to go way back. In 1976, I was calling at Disneyland outside, and it was this huge, massive PA system, and it was a good thing because there was dancers as far as the eye could see, right? So it was like thousands and thousands of dancers. But today, we don't usually encounter those big events, and of course at a square dance festival, there might be a sound company involved, and we certainly need to be aware But usually at the festivals, the equipment is usually pretty standard. You still see, before Yak, it was Hilton. There was Hilton. I remember national conventions where it was just Hilton corner horns, like rows of them, across the front wall. And so it was corner horns before Yaks. But when it comes to like a national convention, they use the common stuff. But I'm guessing it'd be really rare to have a sound company involved, but you might encounter it.
Not really. The reason I mentioned it is I did a number of large area events when I was in Ottawa, also in Alberta, and there was two sound companies. One of them actually belonged to one of my ex-wife's sons, but anyway, once they heard what I was doing with the Yaks and the Hiltons, one of them, they spent close to about $500,000 worth of equipment set up. And I brought in my turntable and the two Yak stacks and set that up. And the sound was clear. It was a really bad acoustic hall. And they were fiddling with all their stuff to get good sound, which they eventually got. But their $500,000, I was able to do effectively with a Hilton turntable and two Yaks.
Yep. How many dancers?
Sorry?
How many dancers?
We had, I think, 750. It was a big event.
Right.
It wasn't a square dance. It was a big event.
Yeah. So for most of us, we dance. We don't have 700 dancers, right?
No. But what they did is they actually contacted Hilton. This is back in the late 80s, early 90s, right. And they bought the turntables and they bought the speakers because they do a lot of those events where they need a PA system and a sound system that they could work together, do their sound, but also do PA, because there's nothing worse than somebody getting up behind a microphone on a dance hall when it's set for a dance hall and trying to make announcements that doesn't know how to use a mic, but they know how to use a personal address system or that. So they bought those specifically for that, and they have them working simultaneously. So
for today's dances, we have a lot more manageable number of dancers in much smaller halls, and so it's much easier to there's not going to be a sound company involved. We'll have full control. And, the main thing we have to do is, make sure the dancers, can hear. So one of the primary things we have to get right is the balance between the music and the vocal. And
Larry, you were talking about using monitors that a few people do. I tried. I thought it would be an interesting idea. I couldn't work with a monitor. I had to be able to listen to what was coming out of the speaker and hearing the same thing the dancers did so that I could get the balance right. And sometimes, or I for a long time would have dancers come up to me and say, the music's too loud. And I would turn it down and then I'd bring it back up again because I didn't hear the balance right. Not what I found was standing ahead of the speaker, in front of the speaker, instead of in back of the speaker, so I could hear directly what was coming out rather than having what's coming around the corner to me.
Right.
And
we didn't.
And in order not to get the feedback you're talking about, you have a fairly directional microphone, and that's.
We didn't talk about mics very much. No. It's interesting on Facebook. I kind of surveyed what different people are using. And if you're a brand new caller, it's a little tricky, to find, what the best microphone for you might be. And so there's quite a wide range of microphones, even though there's probably a few that are really popular among callers. But, what I find is, like if I'm calling for a new group of dancers, I just have to enunciate a little better and not be so casual when I'm calling. When I call for my home group, I can be very casual, but when I call for somebody else, I have to enunciate the calls a little better than I have to purposely enunciate calls. But and of course, after a few tips, they get used to you and you're fine. But
our job as callers is not to just play music with a beat for the dancers. We have to communicate with them,
Yes.
and that's why it's important to have this kind of stuff. Back in the day, I used to, one yak stack, never needed 2 mil because of problems of interference with the two, but 1 yak stack in my little Hilton original micro 75, and covered 20, 30, 40 squares without any problem. Of course, it depends on the hall, but you can compensate by the placement of the speaker quite a bit. It's amazing what you could do, even though the high fidelity wasn't as nice as you might expect, but it was coming off of a 45 and a Hilton needle. When I've digitized some of my old 45s, I definitely didn't use the Hilton. I used a better turntable.
It's a good point, because most of the time, one speaker, 1 yak stack, a full column would do anything I would need. Most of the times I needed 2 is when I had a difficult hall, like one that we had up in Pembroke, where we had to have the airborne regiment come and hang parachutes from the ceilings and the walls. That was a difficult hall. A lot of silk hanging.
Did that work?
Oh yes.
Oh, that usually works great.
Yeah,
Nice.
if you've got an airborne regiment handy that's going to support you and you're in the military, it's great to have access to that. But it's not always there. But most of the time when I needed 2 yak stacks was actually in a hall where the acoustics were absolutely terrible. And I found that 1 yak stack wouldn't do it, but I could put 2 sort of offset on the stage, inset, so that I'm more or less in the center, and then turn the volume down, and a lower volume with 2 in those really, really difficult halls. Sometimes you can set it up so you get much better sound than you would get with one central sound source.
As I said in my talk a year ago, and I posted the link to it, if I had to use 2 because it was early wide hall, I would put them next to each other and point them apart.
Yep.
Rather than having a space between them, leaving a phase canceling area between them.
Yeah. So a good tip is, in a situation, if you're calling in a new place, it's nice to call some callers who called there before and kind of get their thoughts, especially if it's a big gym with a stage at one end, and you can often learn a lot. And I'm always surprised how well my Bose L1 Compact does, just, across the, and ambient halls, dry halls, gyms, places like that. We dance in a buildings called Granges in our area with wood floors. And I'm always, of course, it's a column speaker as well. So it benefits from the characteristics of column speakers. And, but I'm always very impressed, and I'm quite sad that it's being discontinued. But anyway.
Larry, on a different subject, but related to audio, a while back, I finally bought a powered speaker, a small one, figured that'd be good for 2, 3, 4 squares. Has a mixer built in, but I'd set up the original settings, and I didn't really want to go near it after that.
Yeah.
Was getting sound not out of my laptop, but out of an iPod at the time. Hooked up Bluetooth at the iPod and at the speaker so that I could have my music remote, and the volume on the iPod controlled the volume coming out of the speaker. But I wanted to put my microphone remote also, and I was told that if I put my microphone on Bluetooth, that I would have too much of a delay in synchronization of the music and the voice.
Yeah.
And I imagine, I didn't look any further into it. I know you can buy expensive Bluetooth wireless mics that probably use a different frequency and don't have the delay. Is there any thoughts of yours or anyone else? I see Dan grinning like he knows the problem, on what to do and how to handle that.
Well, in my situation, I haven't used any Bluetooth situations, but when I ponder using Bluetooth, the first thought, that came to my mind is there's going to be a delay between my music and it hitting the speaker. And I knew if I hooked my microphone like direct to the speaker, it was going to be weird. Like the music was going to be slightly delayed in relation, to the microphone. But I haven't actually used any Bluetooth connections, although it's going to be in our future. So.
I have, the only time I've used the speaker is doing practicing at home. But
did you notice anything?
No, I didn't. And
Okay.
this is not showing. This is my sound source. This has a lot of my music and control volume and control setbacks and all sorts of other stuff. And I plug a little Bluetooth thing into the bottom of it and one on the speaker, and I'm golden on the music. But I had the mic plugged in directly to the powered speaker, and my perception, I didn't see any delay or out of sync enough to bother me.
So I believe that the Bluetooth latency has gotten a lot shorter with modern devices. I have used Bluetooth for my laptop to my speakers setup because their latency really doesn't matter, because I press play and the only place the sound's coming out of is the speakers. And even 20 milliseconds is, it's a long time if generally, but it's like being across a moderate sized hall. So, the other side of a stage. So it's not a huge delay. Both Larry and I have a single channel. I assume Larry's got the single channel Shure belt pack to a receiver that is, what did it cost? $400 or so. And I have the cable to plug a standard mic into that. But I use that for my Crown headset. And yeah, it's, throw money at the problem and it goes away is the answer I came up with.
I found that if you've got a single source output, even to a powered speaker or a bump speaker, if your microphone and your music are laid on the same output, you don't have that issue. I've never been able to get a microphone and a sound system going on two separate feeds into a speaker to sync up properly. But getting them to go into the computer with Bluetooth and have that sound come out with the computer, there's very, very, very few problems.
It won't surprise me if in the future all of our speakers are going to be wireless, speakers, and then all of our microphones are going to be wireless as well. I mean, cables are, hopefully in the future are going away. So that'll be.
God help us all.
And the cables reminded me, I was buying cheap audio cables when I started out and having flakiness and failure rates and such. And some musician friends of mine said, there's only one thing you need to know about buying cables. Buy cables with Neutrik connectors. Neutrik. And since then, I have only bought cables with Neutrik connectors, and indeed, do that.
Cool.
Dan knows that my approach is not throw money at it to solve the problem, but to try and find interesting, fun workarounds. By the way, I almost taped my iPod to my microphone thing, but look, no reset button. I did have a realistic question for you, and I can't think of what it was.
Well, Realistic was a brand of Radio Shack back in the 70s.
Yeah.
While you're looking for that, Don, does everybody know what a Neutrik connector is? Yeah, I do, but you might want to explain what that is.
Yeah, so, Neutrik is the brand name of a connector manufacturer. And usually the cable manufacturers who are different from the connector manufacturers will advertise that fact when you buy the connector. But yeah, Mel, if you've got more on that, please.
I look at it different. Like when people talk audio, a Neutrik connector is generally a sheath connector where one part actually slides into the other part, kind of like the bottom of a Hilton microphone. That's a type of Neutrik connector where you got your plugs.
Mickey's
or your 3 plugs where it actually goes in, as opposed to a jack connector where you just plug it in and it's got a little ring around it.
Mickey's showing one.
Yeah. That I think that's the difference between an XLR connector and another, because Neutrik does make TRS and TR connectors. But
Hello, everybody.
hello.
Hey.
I just came in. I've been following everything on the phone, and if you don't mind, I would like to present some things as well. It fits perfect.
Yep, go for it.
Going for audio. I've been when I started calling, I started with a 75 and a yak stack, and I've been calling with yak stack speakers for about 20 years. And then I tried testing with other speakers. I tried the HK, the Bose, and I've been at our local music dealer. It's a real big one called Music World. And I've been there since I went full time and had time during the day. I was there every day and we were testing up and down. And so all kind of speaker power mixers. After the 75, I still got it for my records, but I used the MA150 and using the X stacks, but the X stacks were big and, Sultans came up. My S was too sharp for the Sultans, and I think the Sultan was not balanced enough for square dance, and it was too heavy, which is a speaker which was sold over here, pretty similar to the Director. And so I tested all kind of speakers getting smaller. And I had one which I tested, which called PowerWorks, and it was just about the size of a book, right? And but it did not have enough power for the dynamic of the voice, which I'm using. And I finally ended up with a speaker called D5 from Dynacord, and it's perfect. It works within the range we need for our calling to understand the voice, but it also makes the music sound great, and it's very easy to get a nice balance between music and the voice. And I do about 95% of the dances I do is with that setup. And I changed from the MA150 because it had too less power for me when doing bigger dancers. To a equipment which was built by a caller over here, Klaus Mararens, which is, I call the smallest square dance equipment in the world. We just call it the brick. And it's just that size here. And you see the spare space up here? That's where he used to have a mini disc. It was just a time when the mini disc came up, right? And it's just, you see how big it is? It's but just twice, and it got 200 watt sinus. So I can easily call up to 400 dancers with that equipment, no big deal, right? And it got all kind of plugins and set up for speakers, and it's got remote built in, so it works pretty similar like a Hilton. And you can use the Hilton microphone cable, which is cool. And it only got one input due to space problem. But therefore, another caller over here modified a little splitter as it is sold for 4 audio signal sources. And he modified it so everyone can plug his laptop in here and you can switch from one source to the other. That means not like in the Hilton and in the MA150, if the one leaves his equipment running or has sounds on for whatever, you will not have that interference because you only selected one source. Another benefit to it is he modified it that you can use the remote on this. So you go with your computer connection into this unit, and you have one cable going to the amplifier, and you put your remote controls in here, and the microphones are just put in as normal. And the good thing is you can use this with any other power mixer or any other setup. Wherever you have no remote control for the Hilton remote, you could use this equipment. And it's called the little box, just the little box.
So you should buy a brick and a little box. Can you put links to that in the notes, Mickey?
Yeah,
In
I can
chat.
send some. Right.
Put it in the chat.
And that combination I've got is so small, it fits within one suitcase, and I've got a speaker, and it's easy to handle, and it's really, it works. It's proven, right? Ken Ritucci bought one of the bricks when he was over here. Right now, he has a little bit problems with getting them done again. That has to do with the EU certificates, whatever. But he's working around it. I asked him to put 4 microphones in there because he only has 2 microphones inputs in there. He's thinking about it, but on the other hand, you can use a splitter or just a normal microphone splitter, which are available as well. And you could use 4 microphones. You got 4 sources, and it's just nice to play with. And yeah, and it works perfect. Yeah.
I want to jump in here and say 10 minutes late that we're past the hour. So the official close to the end. Again, Dan, thanks for the recording, posting, the Zoom site, and eventually for the uploading to the web. Thank you, Larry. No, let me leave that for last. Thank you guys for coming and listening and partaking, and for hanging around, because there's more stuff. I even have another comment. Surprise, surprise. Don't forget to come next week and listen to Mike Hogan talking about marketing. And let's have a round of applause for Larry Marchese talking about audio and reminding us about a lot of things that should be done. Thank you, Larry.
One more hint I've got with the cables. The advantage of cables, except for the checks, like the XLR or the Cinch, is that you don't have a short circuit for a certain moment when you plug in or unplug. And that's very important. So you got to be careful not to have power on when you go with those checks, because there's always a pop or a short circuit, which could cause damage. Let's put it that way.
And also doesn't sound good on the floor. That's a good point. Right. I wanted to mention that back when I was doing caller schools and introducing newbie callers to sound systems, just very basically, you had a microphone and you had a turntable. Those went into a preamplifier. That went into an amplifier. That went into a speaker. And frequently there were combinations of these different ones, like we've talked about, the preamp being a mixer also. And what I found at that time, and maybe you can, Larry and Dan can, or anyone can tell me if it's still true at the time, but I told people as they're building their system one piece at a time, have something really inexpensive and want to go up, that the most quality bang for your buck was putting your money into a microphone. At the time, I found, if you had an extra $50 to spend on something, it's not going to buy you that much a better amplifier or speaker, but it sure is going from $100 speaker microphone to $150 microphone gave you the biggest bang for the buck. I'm just curious if that's still the case.
Well, I would say that, there's kind of a range that the typical microphones that callers use, that are in the, I don't know, Sm58 you can get pretty cheap right now, but those EVs, all those common microphones are in the $200 range. But certainly Dan and I threw some big bucks on a headset, and I have no regrets. I mean, it sounds amazing. So you could argue from that throwing money at it, but historically, some of the most famous mics around, in terms of live microphones, are all in that mid, 100 to 200 range. There's one microphone I noticed some of the lady callers using that's in the 350 range. That's the highest, most expensive one I've seen.
But my prices were, first of all, inflation changes things, and second of all, I was just using something that you could figure the numbers and percentages easy, so I don't know the exact prices. But my point is that throwing your money after your into a mic makes a lot more, you get a lot more bang for it than you do throwing the similar amount into a speaker or into an amplifier or or mixer or what have you. The microphone is key to, I mean, it helps to improve the other things too, but it takes more money to do that.
Yeah, I would say the speaker makes the most difference. That's my opinion. But definitely, having a microphone that suits your particular voice, is a positive thing.
I noticed that when Larry posted that question about what people use, the Sennheiser E935 and E945 showed up a bunch.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the next tier up from the Electro Voice and the Shure SM58 kind of series. And I think it sounds dramatically better. So yeah, I would definitely go that way. I know the Shure SM58 is the hands down, every musician has two of them in their carry box because they always work and they're bomb proof, but they have really muddy to my ears bottom end, which is great if you want to sound like Barry White, but if you want legible voice, doesn't work nearly as well. And I have the same issue with the what is it, the EV787. I think I use the 767 as my backup mic, which is okay in the bottom end. The 787 makes me sound wonderfully robust and round, but dancers can't hear it. So it's a great singing mic, but it's not a great voice legibility mic.
They can hear you, Dan, they just can't understand you.
Yeah, I guess that's the point. And that was the other thing I wanted to comment on, is that a couple years ago, before Scott Pierce and his gang, who run the sound at the IAGSTC convention, which runs between 800 and 1200 people, before they had invested in hearing assist systems, the Toronto convention got people to lend their hearing assist systems, and I ran around setting those up in all the halls. And so I got a chance to talk with Scott and his crew a bunch about sound for the halls. And if you ever get a chance to do that and talk with those sound guys, because especially that particular crew is used to running sound for concerts and conventions or other conventions and for square dance conventions, so they know the difference. And the way it made me much more comfortable with the, frankly, what I think of as awful sound of square dance conventions, is that, yes, from a musician's ear or from somebody who's used to speak to listening to lectures, it sounds absolutely awful, but for square dancing purposes, it's actually kind of optimized for that purpose. So as I built my own sound system, I have to kind of decide, am I trying to focus on the music and the dancing, or am I trying to focus on the square dancing? Because those are very different sound uses.
Yeah, an interesting thing based on what some of the earlier things you said about the SM58. There is a microphone that sounds so different than from the SM58. It's like, wow. I mean, it really sounds different. And I saw a bunch of lady callers using it. It's the I don't know if you guys know what Telefunken is, but that's a company that makes a microphone called the M80. And I just went to I saw a bunch of lady callers using it, and so I went to the local store and tried it out. And my first thought was, wow, this doesn't sound anything like an SM58. So there are dramatic differences from different microphones. And so, by all means, find out what your favorite callers are using. But you might find a microphone that's completely different from what they're, that works better for you.
Brian, you were holding up a mic. What were you trying earlier? What were you trying to tell us about it?
He mentioned SM58, and this is the SM58 Shure wireless mic. So not a big deal. Although I do prefer the beta systems, because they're the super cardioid as opposed to just cardioid.
Yep.
So they tend to have a tighter cardioid pattern, which tends to be better in a square dance environment, especially if you're standing near a speaker.
Yep.
Yeah, because I remember I did the Tech Squares weekend there with Clark, and I remember Clark, you ended up using my mic because your mic was getting feedback in the room from the Bose that we were using that day. And the difference between our mics was that I had the Beta 58 or Beta 57, and you had the SM57. And functionally, they're the same microphone. It's just one is super cardioid and has a smaller cardioid pattern.
Correct. I have the SM57.
Yeah, which
that's
is it's a good mic too.
Yeah, that's interesting that the pattern difference is not huge, but it made a big difference in feedback. That's interesting.
Yeah, and the other side of that is that if you do not have good mic technique, risking a little bit more feedback with a cardioid rather than a super cardioid is a reasonable trade-off to choose.
I wrote an article for Dancer magazine once. I should dig it out someplace about microphones and what feedback is, because a lot of them didn't know. You know, things. How often have you had your club president get up and make announcements, and he's holding the mic, and then wants to whisper somebody to something, so puts the mic over to the side right in front of the speaker.
Yeah. Right.
And similar things like that. It's not black magic, but you got to pull that curtain aside and look at some of the facts behind it.
Yeah, or they hold the mic down by their belly button and
Yeah.
wonder why it won't pick anything up. Yeah.
Clark?
So as long as we mention the Tech Squares weekend and Brian's here, that's in a pretty hard to sound hall, and we have a dancer who owns a Bose L1, and he prefers the sound quality of that and volunteers to bring it each time, and that's a big help. But even that was not sufficient to sound this hall. As you're standing as the caller in the center section, you have a pretty high ceiling, and you have room for 2 squares wide by 2 squares deep in front of you, and then you're kind of mostly at the back wall. So it's not very deep, but you also have 2 squares off to your right, or 4 squares off to your right and 4 squares off to your left. And those are both under a very low ceiling. So I had read up on the Bose and was a fan of it, and had hoped that the Bose had enough lateral dispersion to be able to sound the wings and the center section all at once. And we tried it, but it wasn't. So instead, what the people who own the hall have is a half yak hung in each of the 3 sections. And that's what's used by some callers to sound each of the 3 sections, because you only have to sound 4 squares on your right, 4 squares in your middle, and 4 squares on your left. So we ended up using those side speakers and still having the Bose for the center section. And that's kind of the best we've been able to get sound in that hall.
That hall is horrible for acoustics. And one of the things, Clark, you mentioned the lower ceilings, but it's I can't remember, is it a step ceiling or is there just a thing that hangs down about 8 inches so they have partitions they can separate the halls? But anyway, you're in the middle section, and getting to either the left or the right section, especially the left one, I think, you bang up against that the ceiling partition thing. And as I recall, I thought they'd put some half yaks horizontally on the partition. I guess that was years ago. And horizontal's not great, but because it was right at the squares, the hall.
Yeah, I think the moral of the story is that, no speaker is going to be perfect in every scenario. So you definitely have to do some trial and error. The one hall where I have, there was one hall that there's not a club there anymore. So the hall went away, I guess. But when I used to call there, that was the one hall that was the biggest challenge with my L1, because it had that the dancers were under this overhang thing. And but we again, you experiment and try to get the optimum thing, and we ended up just going with 2 L1s, even though the hall didn't seem near big enough for 2 L1s, but it took care of that problem of those dancers in the back. I don't know why. We were experimenting, trying different things, and that seemed to do the trick. And it sounds like Tech Squares, they had to do some experimenting to get kind of the optimum thing.
I found that the sound was the best over to the right of the stage, and that was mostly because that's where the snickerdoodles were.
Right.
And you asked, you said you're talking about 12 squares. I thought we've squeezed 13 in there before, but people may ask, well, why the heck do you use a hall where the acoustics are so bad and use it? And it used to be used for a different square dance weekend every weekend. Now they're more family stuff because of square dancing dying down. Well, the reason you use it is because it's in a great location, because the facility is nice, because the meals are out of this world, because the people that own the place understand square dancing and understand that there's square dance, that they got to cater to it to keep the place busy. There are just so many good reasons. If you're curious, look on Google East Hill Farm, New Hampshire, and you'll get a feel for it. We used to do many a weekend up there.
Is the Bozo one the speaker that they brought out? I think it was in the 80s to one of the conventions.
You said is the Bose 01, and I heard you say
L1.
And I heard you say is the Bozo one.
Yeah. A friend of mine was telling me that when they brought out their speaker one time to one of the conventions in the 80s, I think it was in the 80s, they came running into the room and checked out the speaker, said they forgot the adapter, and they went running out and brought the adapter back. They made an adapter specially for the Hilton turntables, and when they plugged it into with the adapter, it made a total difference in the sound. They were just really all the callers were really impressed with it then. But
back in the 80s, the Hiltons might have had Cinch Jones connectors. And it was probably Cinch Jones to 1/4 inch or something like that.
It was an adapter that they were missing, and they went. The Bose guy went running out and got the adapter and brought it back and made a total difference.
But the Jones for a long time.
Yeah, right.
But also, when you're talking about halls, the old San Antonio Convention Center, a lot of callers didn't know that they had a jack in the wall to all the speakers above. And friend of mine went in there with just his little Hilton and his 110, his Hilton 110 speaker. And they said, what are you going to do with that? I'm going to sound this whole hall. And he plugged into the wall, and it's all coming down on the dancers. He said those speakers, that there was the same JBL speakers in the ceiling that was in the Hilton. And he said that they were perfectly spaced to where just about every square the music was coming down right on them.
Stephen Jack Lassery in the hall he had built in Hollywood, Florida, specifically had the speakers in the ceiling, one per square. So the squares would always line up because they'd line up so they'd be right under this. They sort of drift over till the sound was best, and he had them set so the squares were evenly spaced. It was pretty cool. How do you project? Well, straight down at that group, and that worked.
One of the problems I'm having starting up to Mel's earlier point, until the hall manager complained that she thought we were dragging in too much stuff. Before pandemic, and in our old big hall, we had a bunch of moving blankets that I used electrical conduit to build stands for, that I would set around the square dance our squares that would really deaden the reflections. And I highly recommend that if you have a chance to do that. The other problem that we've had is now that we've had a couple of dances out on my back deck where we don't have a lot of the walls and the ceiling to contend with, everybody is saying, I don't want to go back to dancing inside because it sounds awful inside. And so now I have to figure out more outside space where I can sound it without having lots of reflections and such.
Paint clouds on the ceiling, Dan.
Yeah.
To one of the points before you had when sounding also with bands or big exhibitions or big sounding halls or festivals, I usually, when we have a demonstration with 1 or 2 squares, set up my equipment with 1 speaker to monitor the dancers. So they have a sound they're used to. And then I plug in to the big equipment. Usually that works via a DI box, which is more or less a plug-in socket on stage where they have, and they take the whole sound from my equipment as a line out and make the sound for the audience. So there'd be 2 different sounds, one for the dancers and the one for the audience. And for the audience, it would just sound like the band would be playing. So this would be 1 level type thing. And the dancers, they will get the sound getting out of speakers where they can clearly understand the voice. They get their different mixture. This is what I usually do when I do big festivals or demos where there's big equipment set up, or on street festivals or whatever. Because usually the equipment is professionally set up there, makes a good sound. But sometimes it not really fits perfect for the square dance type. As Don mentioned, you can hear but don't understand. And I need my dancers to understand.
Mickey, remind me what part of Germany you're in?
Bavaria.
Okay. Larry, I have a question for you. You never mentioned PV speakers and typical musician kind of things, and contra dancing, which is very popular and needs very similar things to what we have, rarely use rack stacks, yak stacks, or that type of stuff. Use more of a, an elevated PV or some similar type of thing. What can you tell us about that? Can you tell us, as far as communications, it helps if you unmute yourself?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, sorry about that. Trying to be a good citizen there and stay muted. Yeah, so, I worked for PV a long time ago. And, since I returned to square dancing, I looked at their products. And like, if I was going to buy something new, I would definitely look at their products. But I don't use any of their products at the moment. So, yeah, I can't really make any recommendations.
Do they have any column speaker type of thing, or just big bass reflex boxes?
Oh, they have, just about everything imaginable. They have all kinds of things. I don't think they have a column model, but, column speaker model. But yeah, I'm afraid I'm not very current with PV, even though I worked there many years ago.
Mickey held up a little box earlier, and I was wondering if anybody had, for the US market, knew of a 3.5 millimeter passive mixer that. So the problem I have is that I have a board which I have a mixer and all of my voice chain stuff zip tied down to, and I put that down on my table, and then I actually use the mixer and my powered speaker for mixing in the music. And this means that if I set the speaker up on a big tall stand somewhere, I have a single 3.5 millimeter jack coming down. And if I have multiple callers, we all pop when we unplug and plug our music sources in. And if anybody knows of a US 3.5 millimeter passive mixer, I would happily spend $100 on that right now. The silence is deafening.
Yeah.
Well, you could check this out, because this is a regular splitter which is sold in electronic shops, and it's usually for different sources. And so if you have one long cable going up to the speaker, you can hook all the other sources like laptops in there. The modification made was to use the remote control.
Okay.
Right? But if you do not need the remote control for the microphone cable like Hilton type thing, then you as well would just can use this one here.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I
And
guess
this should be available in electronic store.
just use a bunch of 1/4 inch. I mean, a 3.5 millimeter to RCA jacks, and have a
Right.
tail of those lying around. That's reasonable. Cool.
Yeah.
I was talking about working on a budget and doing stuff Bluetooth. By the way, I bought this quite a while ago just because I thought it would be handy, but it's an amazing little device that costs, I don't know, 10 to 15 bucks, and it makes anything Bluetooth. If you have a, either input or output, you can plug it in here, or this connector comes out and you can use the female end of it to plug cables into. And I mean, I use it just for my sound system in the house, connecting Bluetooth, some non-Bluetooth speakers to my iPod on the other side of the room, and it just does a lot of interesting and decent stuff. It's got a charger with a standard micro USB on the back, and charge lasts all day if we're just listening to music, or actually a lot longer than that. It definitely lasts through a dance. So, and I'd tell you what the make is, but there are, I think, several things like it on the market.
And I have a slightly larger box of that I zipped down to the aforementioned piece of perf board, which is my voice chain, that has a plug-in, a wall wart adapter that I'm happy to share the stuff on, because yeah, that was really nice to get that computer disconnected in that part of the.
I think it says Tektronix on it, but even if under the right circumstances, that even has a volume control up and down on the side that I haven't had the opportunity or need to use before. But this main button just turns it on and off, and has a flashing light in it, so you can tell when it's pairable and when it's connected and what have you.
How is it powered?
Battery inside, rechargeable.
Okay.
Micro USB, and the battery lasts, because it doesn't do a heck of a lot, so it doesn't use much battery. It lasts for hours and hours.
I mean, talking about equipment, we had a lot of callers over here trying to, everybody creates his own system type thing, whatever. And I'm not so happy about that, because I thought, having kind of a standard is cool, that you just plug in your microphone and your remote, and you can start to work, or as well plug in your laptop or mini disc, or I don't know, hardly anybody works with records, but it should be everything. I think we should when inventing something, to kind of be compatible. So other callers coming in are used to their work with using the remote and having the unit, and don't need to have an engineering bachelor or degree for working the system, right? So.
No, when you're saying compatible things, I have to laugh, joke at myself, where I changed the direction of the remote volume on my Hilton thing, and it was great for me, but when I used somebody else's, boy, was I in trouble.
Well, I tell you what,
Hilton and Mac are that's what they're trying to do, is be to be the one thing, that everyone uses and everyone's used to. So.
Well, with the Hilton remote, the old ones, they had some kind of plastic on there, which worked like a saw. And calling a whole weekend, I gotta admit, I'm a kind of a remote-aholic, and I was going up and down. Everybody said your thumb is bleeding. and I was cut down all the way through the bone. So, and it was tough for it to grow together. So I had to get used with the other hand, and then it works the other way around. So
you have to get one of these.
yeah, well, that was later on. I put some knobs on there, but first I started putting some leather thumbs done from deer skin around my thumb, and had Tony Oxendine. When he saw that, he was just laughing. But when I told him the story, he said, "Oh yeah, okay." And then I put a leather knob on there, got a bit bigger. And then I had a dance I called with Al Stevens, and we were playing forth and back, and suddenly he stopped calling and was just watching. And so I said, "What?" I said he never seen a caller changing microphone from right to left and working the remote just as if it wasn't there, you know. I said, well, I had to get used to it because I couldn't use my one thumb for at least a half a year, right?
The lesson you should have learned, Mickey, is not to pump the music that much. You know?
Yeah, well, especially the singing call or wherever with the dynamic is when I have a certain level set, but when I call, I usually put it down. That's the way I do it. And it's, I guess it's my type of presenting singing calls as well. I like the dynamic, right?
Yeah, I'd say using a headset a lot has gotten me out of the habit of making volume. So I just set it, put the headset on, and I have to use my voice more, to pump the emotion more than the music. So.
Yeah, but on the other hand, using a headset, I've tried that too. But I use it for teaching or maybe hold-ons. That's good. But when singing, you go far away, you go close to. There's a lot of potential in there.
Well, that's good. If your microphone has you know what I mean by a proximity effect, makes it warm and toasty when you get it up real close to your mouth.
Yeah.
And when you pull it away, it makes it more thin. Well, your headset, doesn't have that proximity effect like the handheld mics, but it's like right there. So, but I sometimes grab it, mostly when I have to sing high notes and it's going to be a little bit too loud. So I literally hold the thing and pull it back just a little bit, and I use it, for that. But my headset is nice and warm and toasty, when it's up here. And
yeah, I have the philosophy, if using a headset professional, then you need one on the board putting the things up and down. He needs to know what a song, and then you can use it really effectively. If we're talking about singing, right?
Right, singing calls, right?
And and otherwise, I prefer the handheld microphone. I guess I'm a rock and roll.
That's fine. Yeah, like at C1, I have to have a handheld, so I use it there. I use both, even though with my own groups, I really enjoy the headset.
The proximity effect you were talking about is that the bass notes are amplified more when it's closer, and the further you get, the more bass and treble are similar, but as you get closer and closer, the bass get more amplified than the other tones do. And Electro Voice, back when I first bought microphones, I don't know what the story is now, but used to have an acoustic circuitry in there, and I don't recall the acronym they abbreviated it by, but that would compensate so that you'd get a smooth amplification no matter, when you brought your mic close or further away, it didn't amplify it had killed the bass, so it was an even no matter how far or close you brought your microphone. And that's one of the reasons I pushed those at the time. I remember when I was buying, I tried a Shure microphone, and at the time they didn't have that. And it's go for the muffly over bass when you got close. So again, at the time, and who knows now, but Electro Voice had an acoustic system that would equalize that, so you didn't get the smooth, as you call the smoothness when you got close, but it was intentional to give you a flat response no matter how far or close you held the mic.
On their top lines, they still got it. It's a little switch right on top. Yeah, they still have that.
What do they call? Do you remember what they call that, Nikki?
Well, I'm not sure. Let me see.
Got very quiet.
Well, Mickey's looking for that. I wanted to note, I have been thinking about buying a dedicated compressor, which is a device which you can put how long you want it to try to normalize volume and what volume you want to normalize things to. Because especially as my singing gets more dynamic, there's some sound effects, screams and growls that you can only do at certain volume levels. And so having something like that rather than a sound guy trying to ride the soundboard that does it automated might be worth a couple $100 to put on my soundboard.
The one thing is, which says here, concert, which you've got that type thing you can use when going close and forth and back. And the other one is pretty much keeping it straightforward, probably for talking or whatever. So you can there's a switch on there, you can take it off. But this is the big one, the
967.
967, right? They used to have it on the other one, on the 4 and on the 7 as well. I don't know what their premium type microphone is right now, but they usually have it on the top 2 microphones. They've got those switches.
What does that switch do? I missed what you said.
It's with that bass thing. It keeps it in one level,
Oh,
or
okay.
you can have the full range, right?
Yeah. Show that to me again. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
can see it on a thing. There you got one thing where it goes up and down,
Looks like it's a
a
low
lot.
frequency roll off.
right?
Like it's flat on one side and then it rolls off the bass on the other.
Right.
But that may not be right. I'll read about it and find out.
Okay.
Liked about
And-
the D1200.
Looking at Sweetwater here, I might have lied about the cost of a compressor. It looks like, in fact, dedicated hardware vocal compressors start at $1,200 and go up from there.
Yeah, I used to have all that kind of equipment back in the day. So
You'll be surprised what you can find on eBay.
right.
The ND 767 from EV's microphone and Hilton cable. How much you think I've paid for both of them together?
Well, if you bought them list, that's I don't know, about $100 for the mic and $80 for the cable.
I got it for $89 for both.
Sweet.
Congratulations.
Similarly, I'm experimenting with, my wife wants to play around with Chladni plates and somatics and making audio do physical things. And so I asked on a local free stuff group yesterday about, does anybody have some big speakers that they don't mind getting rid of that are able to damage? And I have some things with cones that must be 14 inches wide that somebody just said, yeah, these have been sitting in the back of my garage for forever. And so
Yeah, I saw your post. It's
yeah. My neighbors are going to hate me.
I just posted a link to one of the Bluetooth adapters for all of $13 for you big spenders like I am. You might need 2 of them, though, one for each end. Just a typical one, not the one I've got from Amazon. One of the things about calling outdoors is you're not worried as much about aiming focus sound because you don't have anything reflecting back off the ceiling to interfere. You just turn the volume up to get it out to the back of the hall. But
Right.
Well, if you call in the Bavarian Alps at Königssee, this is not quite correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have a big echo there.
I've got my backyard, in order to like provide the most dampening between me and the neighbors, I set up in between the R2 buildings, the house and the workshop, and the swim spa has an awning and a bunch of shade cloth and things like that. So I point the speaker at the shade cloth. So that's a nice, really dead backdrop. So unfortunately that deck will take 2 squares only if they're really tight squares. So, oh well.
The thing I noticed, though, another thing about outdoors, I'd be hired for a party night in a neighborhood. You know, we've got all the neighbors coming in and what have you. And I said, if you told all the neighbors that it's going to happen, well, yeah, they're all invited. No, I mean 2 or 3 blocks beyond that, because outdoor sound really travels. And the main thing to do is tell them that we are going to go exactly till 10:30. You don't have to call the cops. We're not going all night. And people say, oh, don't worry about it. Well, sometimes they really should have worried about it. It's amazing how sound does travel outside.
Everyone, I've got to sign off for the day. So
Happy Mother's Day weekend, everybody.
Yes, yes.
As you said, thanks again, Larry, for leading
We'll visit
this,
again,
getting us thinking.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the marketing thing next week.
Yeah, good.
Bye.
Take care.
Cool. Well, it seems like we've kind of hit a lull. And
thank you.
Thanks, Cece. Speaking of motherhood.
Does anybody else have to go buy presents for their wife from their dog?
From their dog?
I don't do that kind of stuff. I tell my husband, I'm not your mother. It's not your job.
I tried telling that to my wife, but she said, oh, it's Mother's Day this Sunday about 11 times this week. So, and I said, well, you're not my mom. He said, yeah, but I'm Moo's mom. So I kind of have nowhere to go on that one.
Well, I'm celebrating Mother's Day by taking my 2 kids to go see Dr. Strange tomorrow.
Mother Brian.
I tried well, it's Mother's Day. I'm going to go out and have brunch and let you clean up the house without me underfoot. Happy Mother's Day. No, that doesn't work. The look on your face, Yolanda.
One thing I did find out way at the beginning when I started, well, I had sold my Hilton equipment, so I didn't have anything to use. So I switched over to using mixers. And the first thing I did was I went and got the cheapest mixer I could find, which was the Behringers. Because for $60 I could get a nice little small Behringer mixer, and I thought it was working great. But I did find that the quality of the Behringer mixers didn't quite stand up. So over time, some of the channels stopped working, or some of the knobs were not quite so good anymore. And now at $60, you could just buy a new one, and then you just move on. But I've found since that for me, it was better just to buy a better mixer. So now I buy Mackie. So it's a much better quality mixer. And also there tends to be a lot less bass hum from the board itself. Whereas the Behringer would tend to give you a little bit of bass hum that you would find from hall to hall. Or most likely it was a grounding issue, because the Behringer mixers only come with a 2-prong. They don't come with a 3-prong, so they don't ground themselves. So
starting out again on a budget, and also being a electronics experimenter, ham radio operator and builder, my first setup before I bought my Bogan was I had an old turntable that was a 3-speed thing, and I just needed the 45 and a little bit slower. So I went in on the spindle that changed the speed and wrapped a little bit of tape around the 33 spindle until it brought it up to just a little less than 45. So I had two speeds, 45 and slightly slower. And as far as the mixer, why I built a little box that had a potentiometer in there that cut music gain. So volume, I control the combined volume from the Heathkit turntable I had, amplifier I had, and varied the music voice volume by just attenuating the music a little bit more with a little box that I built. Definitely don't recommend that, but it was fun at the time. Then I went to a Bogan, then I went to a Hilton finally.
I think that lesson about avoid trying to cheap out too much is a hard one for me to learn. I mean, I keep relearning it.
Well, it's so tempting. You walk into the store and you see this thing, it's like $80. Oh, well, I could buy two of them and I'd have a backup. But, you know, at the end of the day,
and then you need a backup.
Then you need a backup. And,
Yeah.
you know, the problem is we're supposed to be professionals. So you get up on stage and you present yourself. And if your equipment breaks down on you, there goes all of your professionalism. So
I wasn't professional at the beginning.
you know, that's the nice thing about the Hiltons is they tend to be reasonably bulletproof. Like I remember being there when Eric Hennerlau brought his I think it was an MA 150 that he had purchased. It was actually run over by a car, and he was able to use it for his dance because it still worked, but he wanted Hilton to fix it, so they went ahead and fixed it. And actually, I don't think they fixed it. I think they gave him a new one. But yeah, it was, you know, it's one of the cool things about these things. They tend to be reasonably bulletproof. But you can't beat the simplicity of the Hilton design. Like it's very simple, and it's designed for non-audiophiles to sound a hall without having to be too complicated.
Has anybody hooked up a scope to a Hilton and seen got a feel for what the output is? Because there are things about that make it sound like it's always clipping in the audio path to me, which gives it a very harsh sound. And I think that's part of what the legibility comes from in it. But man, it just drives me nuts to listen to it. It sounds like everybody is overdriving their mic.
I have not.
That problem.
Say something, Brian, so that you're the dominant view on the screen.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll say something. Yeah, no, this is the little tiny mixer that I use now, and it's great. It's the Pro FX6 by Mackie, and the only reason I do the Pro FX is because it's also great because it has the effects stuff in it, so you can do reverb and what have you. And I use that for karaoke, which is sort of separate from the square dance stuff.
And do you have a powered speaker then?
Yes.
Okay. And
Yes.
what about remote control? That doesn't work.
I don't use remote control. I got out of remote control once I switched to mixers.
Okay.
Yeah, I have the mic control, but it doesn't plug into anything. So
Okay.
I can spin
This
it
would
as
work.
much as, yeah, but
You-
I don't
Yeah.
have
Okay.
a use for it. I don't use it.
Okay.
I don't feel it actually enhances my performance.
Okay. Just what you said about the Hilton with Eric Hennelau. I remember when Kenny Reese had an accident with his motorbike. He had a 75 on there. It was quite some damage, but the Hilton just ran. There was no problem with the Hilton, right?
Well, whoops. Have we hit
You're-
that time of the evening?
You were about to talk about how quiet it was, and then you muted yourself. And
Yeah.
it really was quiet.
Yeah. I will get off to my various experiments and see if I can let the smoke out of some additional speakers here.
Hey Mel, what time is your session on this afternoon?
9 a.m. my time. Whereabouts are you at?
Pacific.
Vancouver. Hang on a second, I'll tell you. I just gotta pull it up. Vancouver is.
That's probably 3 o'clock
down-
my time,
down at the bottom here.
or 4 o'clock.
It should be 4 o'clock and 3 o'clock
Vancouver.
social hour.
Yeah, 4 p.m.
All right.
10?
No, I was. It's something that's been coming up a lot, and ironically, it's something that's been coming up in on about 4 or 5 different lines on the Facebook thing.
It's 6 hours from now, isn't it?
3. Yep, 6 hours from now.
7 p.m. Eastern.
That's
Yeah.
the easier way to do it.
Yeah.
And what's your topic today?
Why are we as callers setting up dancers to fail?
Oh,
'Cause
nice.
it's fun.
It was. I've been asked a lot of questions. I did a session on this several years ago at a caller school where I sent out right across the board, what are the big issues? And I was surprised at what I got as responses of where the priorities lie. And then it just dawned on me, there's been about 8 or 9 different streams about, I called this and the dancer stopped, or I called that and the dancer stopped, or I called it this and this didn't work and the floor broke down. And
Well, that happens to me all the time.
yeah, and the choreography itself is good, but why is it failing? And it's something that new callers,
the
happens to
dancers
new
aren't.
callers a lot. So that's what I wanted to talk about.
Yep.
Yeah.
Clearly, it's the dancer's fault. The dancers would just apply themselves a little bit more.
I have to quote L. Stevens. He said, when one square is always standing at a dance, the square is at the wrong dance. If the whole floor is standing the whole time, the caller is at the wrong dance.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
And I think recently I quoted Jim Mayo saying, if there's a problem on the floor, it's yours. You're the caller. You know, if
I
there's,
always say if something goes wrong, blame the caller. He gets paid.
well, not only that, but either he mumbled or he called something
Yeah.
that was too difficult for the floor, or
Yeah.
he called something that was impossible, but you can always trace it back to the caller or the butterfly or something like
Absolutely.
that. Mickey, are
Anyway,
you
that's
still in
the
contact with
generality
Al
of the
Stevens?
topic.
Haven't been for the last 6 or 7 months, but we had phone talks during the COVID, and I'm trying to get a hold of him again in one of the next weeks. But I hope to see him at the Colorado convention. Maybe he would show up, but he more or less retired, and now I think he's starting again.
Well,
He was a little bit mad about a caller when he called something and they couldn't dance, and from the floor the callers would shout up and tell him he couldn't do that, and whatever. And he thought, oh no, my gosh.
Remind him when you talk to him that when I talked to him 2 years ago, I asked him to do one of these sessions, and
Okay. All right.
and I just haven't gotten around to calling again, but I don't think he wanted to. But I would love to have his perspective because he's got one.
Absolutely. Yeah.
For better or for worse.
Yeah.
So, has anybody used one of these? I just
Uh,
put the box out. It's a dual capture XS from Roland.
That looks very similar to my Behringer UMC 202 or 404 HD, which so I have used that class of product. I have not used that product particularly. Unfortunately, and this is really weird because I thought that this stuff was all very standard. That device gives me horrible stuttering when I try to use that as my Zoom microphone input.
Okay.
But it works absolutely great for capturing recording music. And mine is the Behringer version. So, and you get the focus right. Yes.
I got the Tascam.
It's good for Zoom meetings and recording, right?
So we should have a session on a swap shop here.
Yeah.
what was Mikey holding up? I didn't see.
He was holding up the focus right.
Right. Okay.
And that is remarkably similar. I'm trying to remember. A friend of mine is the US rep for a device that looks really similar to that and might actually be the Focusrite for importing those to the US market. So
Dan, as you mentioned, oh, somebody's talking. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I'm going to head out, guys. So I will see a few of you in about 6 hours. If not,
And
you guys have a great
Hopefully I
Mother's
can
Day.
make it.
As I was going to say, Mel, about 5 minutes ago, Dan said it sounds quiet enough that maybe we are finished. So if Dan's leaving and you're leaving and I'm leaving.
And Dan, I would have one more question to you.
yeah.
Regarding Square Desk, connecting with the lyrics with the music, what type of format can I use?
Right now it's basically just HTML.
No PDF?
No PDF. We're trying to sort that out, and I think we will probably end up with a PDF, but of course you can't edit PDFs, so it's a
Okay, I'm calling with a Mac Air, so I'm a Mac user.
yeah. Yeah, we PDF's a little harder, and neither Mike nor I has gotten there, especially since we almost always edit our cue sheets. So
what about text format or RTF or a TXT?
I think TXT will work. I
Okay.
think. I know I did at some point. I kind of made that an option, and I don't remember whether that's stayed in there or not. The other thing is that because it's got an integrated lyrics editor, it's easy enough to just open that cue sheet, copy it, paste it over, apply a few a few formatting tweaks if you want to. So that part goes fairly easily.
Oh, okay. But that's in the description, not that text editor.
What? So on that second lyrics page, there's an unlock for editing button. When you do that, when you click that, you're in an editing mode. You have to remember to save. But yeah, you can, it's that lyrics tab is an editing tab.
Okay. I guess I have the other question again, but I get forward to you.
Okay, well, so sorry, which is the other question? What's?
No, I'm sure I'm gonna have another question, but
yeah, but please. And yeah, I haven't been working on it because I never got it building on my Mac. Mike does the Mac builds, and my Linux laptop died, and so I haven't gotten back around to working on it again. But at some point, I'll undoubtedly flip around and start adding features again.
Okay. Thanks.
Cool.
Bye all.
All right. Catch you all later.
Ditto. See ya. Thanks again, guys.